1 2 1 2. Ooh, hiya, hiya. 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 1 2 1.
Hatch time.
Sounds a bit like there's a terror attack.
Great.
Mic check 1 2.
Well, we've got an intro. Welcome back to Radio Juxtapoz. My name is Doug Gillen, and on today's episode, we're coming to you from our glamorous studio setup in Ostend, Belgium, for our second of 3 episodes recorded live and in person at the Crystal Ship Festival. Today, we go on a journey with Israeli visual noisemakers UNGA and TANT from the Broken Fingaz crew. Since the early noughties, Broken Fingaz have been using public space to craft their own instantly recognisable and unique universe. Blending illegal, ephemeral actions with large-scale commissioned murals, they've forged their own path on a road that is increasingly well-travelled. Originating from the northern city of Haifa, in equal parts their work offers reflection and escape from a region fraught with social-political tension. To understand these worlds that they create and the chaos often depicted through their hypergraphic and visually arresting work, we need to understand the context in which the Broken Fingaz was formed. Join us for the next hour as UNGA and TANT paint a picture of life on the fringe and the formation of one of the most energised crews to emerge from street art culture. Thank you to the whole team at Crystal Ship for facilitating this. All the relevant links will be in the show notes. Enjoy the episode.
L'chaim, yeah, I know. Cheers, l'chaim.
Can you just do me a favour? Can you introduce yourselves?
We can introduce each other. I'm sitting here next to Tant, BFC.
And this is UNGA, original Broken Finger.
You guys have just created a brand new mural here in Ostend in Belgium. And I think it's a little different for you guys. So could you maybe describe what it is that you've painted and how the experience was?
First of all, where are we? We're at your hotel room, which you told us to come. You said to wear something comfortable. So let's see what will happen.
He was really hoping for something else.
But we are in on the seaside of Belgium in Ostend, Ostend, I believe. I believe it means whale's vagina. I don't know what the name means. But
I like that. As a prerequisite for coming to the festival, you need to know the full history of Ostend in Belgium. When was it formed? Who discovered it?
But it's a nice place. Everyone looks a bit like prehistoric fishermen. Yeah, we were invited for the festival to paint a mural. Deso was also here. It's important to mention. He left this morning, so he's not with us. We painted, if we have to describe it, so it's quite simple. It's a 3-story building and a brick wall painted in off-white. And then on top of it, there's a bird that is upside down and is with a super thick outline, just brush strokes. Kind of minimal, much more minimal than what we usually do.
It's completely stripped back. I mean, I associate Broken Fingaz with colour and something a lot more of a visual attack, and this is still grabbing, but in a completely different way. What was the thought process behind this?
I think if you follow our recent works, you will see like similar stuff, but I think it's the first time we do try something like this on a wall, like on a big wall. Because we do drawings all the time with ink and with spray paint, and what make it strong, I think it's that you're taking something that's supposed to be like small. We would paint it on like a A4 paper or something, and then you put it on like buildings, so it's surprising. That's the first reaction when people see it, and they're like a little bit shocked. I don't know. For us, it's just like we tried the last couple of murals to try every wall something new that will first of all will be surprise for ourselves.
I think that's, especially after you've been painting for as long as you guys, I think that's important to be able to kind of continue to push yourselves as well as the audience.
Super important.
Tell me about the bird. Does it symbolize anything in particular, or is this something that you're keeping close to your chest?
I think it's a simple image, so you don't even have to explain it. You see a bird and then, but if you see the image, it's clear because it's a bird, but the head is down, so it's not going up definitely. And above it, it's the sky because it's outside, so you kind of see the bird not where it's supposed to be. The plan is to release a print with this image as well. And then all of everything that we sell will go to refugees in Ukraine. So that was kind of the idea for us of like a way to deal with what's happening without directly deal with it.
Was that something that you felt initially compelled to do, to raise money for, to draw attention to?
I think we talked about it between us just because it's a big thing for everyone. But Deso is from Russia originally, and in Haifa there's like huge population of Ukraine. So when you just talk to people, it's it's real. It's very real and it's very close. Subconsciously, even it's something that is in your mind of like, yeah.
I guess politics has always kind of been there for you guys, and this is maybe jumping forward. That sort of taken over some of the other noise that exists in the the political chat in Haifa.
It's nice not to be in the center of there's a war and we're not involved. It already feels great.
You're like, let's talk about this one.
Yeah, even though you feel it because there's a lot of because of all the elite from Russia are kind of running away now because they're seeing what happens in Russia, and a lot of them are coming to Israel, specifically to Haifa even. So, and also from Ukraine, obviously the refugees. So you do feel it because the law in Israel is like, as long as you have a grandpa or a grandma that is Jew, you can just come.
Is it mainly Ukrainian Jews and Russian Jews that are coming in, or is it across a wide sector?
Right now, because of the war, it's kind of specific refugees because it's the elite. Like the Russian Barbara Streisand is just moved to Israel and stuff like this. That is funny because they don't see future there.
Help me out here. Officially, currently, Broken Fingaz is 3, 4?
Three is the core of us active working together. The fourth one is just really doing music the last few years. So he's still a good friend and we, think about ideas sometimes, but 3 that are actually painting.
You guys are predominantly still based in Haifa. I know that you've been based, UNGA, in London. Do you still very much have a base in Haifa? Do you go back a lot?
Yeah, I've just been there. Tant used to live in Tel Aviv and he just moved back to Haifa. And Deso just moved. He was in Mexico for 2 years. So we kind of move around, but we always come back to Haifa. That's the headquarters.
Up until COVID, we used to travel a lot together for like 10 years that we've been constantly moving, basically.
How do you keep that dynamic? You're 3 individuals, 4 individuals, but, you're operating as this single entity. It's not an easy thing to do.
Maybe from outside it doesn't look easy, but for us it's so natural. Like, first of all, we grew up like this. Like, me and UNGA grew up in this community. Our parents are like also work together. They're architecture artists, and we grew up in this kind of commune that there were a lot of people that took different parts. So I think we kind of grew up into that group identity.
Yeah, like a mentality of a collective.
Yeah,
I'm not going to skip over that because it's kind of an interesting thing. This is the TAV group.
Yeah.
For you, you'll have probably done this 1,000 times, but it's quite interesting just to hear this. Oh yeah, we just grew up in a commune. It was a kind of an eco-architecture space. Like, tell me more about this. What was that experience like? I mean, not that you would have known any different, but what was that environment like, kind of as a place to grow up?
Yes, so it was like a kind of a village. It's like inside Haifa, inside the city, but it's like on a wadi, like a valley that goes down to the sea. And there were like 5 buildings that they kind of squat, our parents, and we used to call it mushrooms. It's like rounded buildings, right? Like houses. And it was very good childhood, I would say. We were like there were a lot of like friends that came, like rainbows, like kind of hippies and
Not the rainbow. Not
rainbow movement.
It's like a super hippie. I think they started Greenpeace initially, but it's like they have gatherings all over the world. So each year it's in a different place, and then you have like thousands of people, like dreadlocks, like music, and very like real hippie, not even like
90s hippies, I don't know how
yeah,
Oh, like a Brooklyn hippie.
yeah, no, it's like really like you smell the hippiness. But also, but also drugs and fun stuff. And we were too young to fully understand what's going on, I think. But we just got exposed to a lot of music and people around and like, art. So it was cool. It was like very free. So that's why when TANT says it's normal for us, so that's what we saw is like, a group working together, which is generally in Israel because of the history of that it's more socialist and you have the kibbutz. So it's not that rare to have this mentality if I compare it to other places that are, that have more capitalistic history.
And then when we grow up a little bit, we start to see graffiti when we travel to Europe, and that's, I think, the second part of a group. When you do graffiti, you go out to bomb, you need to have a crew.
You already had a crew.
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, even earlier, before we had Broken Fingaz, so it's gathered as a graffiti crew.
So pre-Broken Fingaz, you guys were still running about together, painting?
Not really. We were just hanging together, skating, doing whatever. But then graffiti came and it just made the perfect sense for us. Okay, well, we like to paint. We like to be with friends. We need the rush and the adrenaline of kids. And now we can all focus on something, productive with it. So it just felt like this is the greatest thing in the world and we want to do it forever. Even though we never ever thought that it will be like a career or something, but
Yeah, I don't think anyone at that time thought that there was a career in it.
No, not at all.
Would you be painting in Haifa, or was it not until...
When I was 13, we moved out. There was a trial and they were kind of kicked off the place after living there for more than 10 years.
Something about disputed land.
Yeah, basically they say it was illegal, but they did pay all the time, but to the wrong guy or something. And then we had to move out, and we kind of first we just moved to our grandma's, I think, with the whole family. Just they took us, and they're like, okay, we live at their parents' place for like 6 months or more, and then we were like in Haifa.
And you were already like 5 siblings, no?
6 kids.
6.
We were, because I have a big family, and we were like 6 in the living room of my grandma.
Oh wow! I'm going from this fucking open commune.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, in our house we also were in one room, but it was a big room.
Each one had a corner.
Yeah, it's true. Even though there were no corners because it's a circle, but. I remember it first as like being 13 and like, man, I had the best place in the world, and now like I don't want to be in the city. But then it was pretty quickly we're like, oh, skateboarding, graffiti, the fun part of the city, and then we took it to this direction, and we met.
And then parties and.
Yeah, and we met. It's actually a kind of good age to move to the city, and I met Kip. We started the crew initially, and then TANT, because he was hanging out with us all the time. It just made sense, and Deso moved to Israel, and we met, and that's the crew started.
Actually, what was Haifa like as a city round about this period? Like, what are we talking? Early 2000s, mid 2000s?
Early 2000s.
It's not really a city, first of all. You call it a city, and it's maybe the 3rd biggest city in Israel, but it's like a village. It used to be like a
very working class.
And there was basically not much happening culturally. We were teenagers. We used to go to Tel Aviv for parties. Graffiti wasn't exist in Haifa like till 2000, I think.
Where was your interest in graffiti coming from if it wasn't coming from necessarily from Haifa?
Yeah, we got some magazines back in the day from Berlin mostly. I mean, we visited Berlin like...
which is just something that you see on, I don't know, on TV. We brought Kip that have a grandma in Bromley outside London. He brought a magazine. And that was like, okay, we saw it and it was just something that is too cool we just have to do it. And that's it. We went for it. Because we were talking even then, how come there's zero graffiti? It's true that it's not really a city, and it's even though it's like 300,000 people, you don't feel it. But there was always like an artistic scene, just super small and close. So it could be punk rock or before the rock and roll or something. So it's not like you live like in the suburbs and there's zero. It's just you really have to look for it, and you have to create if you want something else that is like, you can go to a punk rock show, but if you want a hip hop party, you have to create it. And people will come because there is roots of like, especially that we mentioned there's a huge like Russian and Ukraine population. Yes, so they are very cultured like in their roots. And even if their parents used to listen to classical music, it's still something that, they grew up on appreciating music. So when we started later on throwing parties, they were, I would say, like probably like 50% would be like Russian kids and Ukrainian that really...
thirsty for something.
Yeah, they are more connected to what happened in Europe or in England.
So tell me about that sort of initial party scene that was just you guys trying to fill a void. This was all part of just you taking this ethos from this community.
There's
and
no ethos at all. At this point, it's just we don't want to drive to Tel Aviv to have a party. So we will make one here for our friends. And then it just like started to become a thing.
And the art was embedded in the heart of this? Or was it an extension just to promote it?
No, it was just like, we started to do parties like almost 20 years ago, 2003 or 4, I think was the first one. And it was just no one before gave us a platform to do a poster or a flyer. And we always wanted. So that was the first time, okay, now we can actually design a poster. So it was just,
It was a big part of it, I think. All the graphic around it and like the concept and...
Was it for you guys just trying to be like, okay, if this night had an image, this is what this night would look like?
Completely, yeah.
Definitely.
And a great school for us because it was every week poster needs to be made. So you have a deadline, so you just make it and you work on it, and then it's printed. It's all over town, so people see it, and then you kind of get critiques, and like from week to week, and people then start to collect it. So it was really our school in this sense of just doing a lot. Like even if a lot of it wasn't that great, but just the quantity.
Yeah. Just eventually you'll get good enough that
exactly.
People are gonna like it. So what were you looking at then for inspiration?
Comics books,
horror movies, a lot of this stuff, illustration, like medical books, illustrations, a lot of those stuff. That was in the early years, right? You have to understand there's no art gallery even till this day in Haifa. No, like one proper gallery. So it's even hard to say. So
and we didn't even call it art back then.
No.
Like when we used to draw and we used to print our stuff and do paste up or just doing graffiti.
Yeah.
We didn't thought to be part of any art scene or something like this.
No, but it was very connected to like the music, because it's the same people that comes to the party or play at the party would be the people that that do graffiti and small place.
How is your relationship with religion growing up there?
When we were kids, I mean, there were like the neighborhood that we had our school in. It was like a Hasidic neighborhood. They were Orthodox. And like, so you see lots of them and you don't have any connection to them.
It's weird. It's very, I think it's mixed Haifa, but also the history is kind of working class, more left, socialist and secular. Like it's the only city in Israel where you will have buses in Shabbat, in Saturday. So even in this sense, it's more laid back. It's not really part of your childhood, but then when you grow up, you understand that you were brainwashed a lot. Not so much about religious also, but more about the whole Zionist idea of like, you're just, just going to school, but then you realize that all those years, they told you a certain narrative about. And then the Jews came from Europe and the land was empty and we just built a beautiful country. Cool, sounds like a great story. And then slowly you grow up and you start to ask questions and like, hey, well, all those Palestinians, but they were here before. So, but that's how the system works, you know.
Yeah, it works to keep that information away from you. Do you remember, is that kind of like a coming of age that everyone kind of goes through?
The sad thing is most of the people, I don't think they reach to this realization. Yeah, they just still live in this narrative, because once you start to question it, then you have a lot of questions about what the fuck is happening and are we really right? And, you know, so you really have to keep this narrative alive. And that's the strength of the system, that the narrative is so strong that you just don't question it. And there's so much sacrifice being made by this point that if you start to question, was it right? So then wait, all those people who died and got injured wasn't for the right cause, so you cannot even open this door. So it's just like, don't even go there, you know.
Clever.
It's just the way it is, and it's like, it's weird in Israel because you can talk about religious. Surprisingly, you can criticize religious and politics, but then the taboos are different, which is more like army. Don't talk about the army, like don't question. We are just the most moral army in the world, and don't even question. And then, yeah, the whole thing of like this is a Jewish state. Also, don't talk about that, because if you do, then you're anti-Zionist, anti-Israel. You cannot, you know. So just don't. You're against us.
Was this kind of thing, we'll just call it politics, was that a factor in your early work? Was your work a kind of a response to this, a reflection of this, or was it nothing to do with this at all?
I think most of our work, I mean, in the early years, I think we even tried to get away from this because you live in Israel and it's all about this. And when you meet someone from abroad, he probably will ask you about politics and what do you think about it. So we kind of tried to create our own Utopia world and kind of live in our imaginary land. Later on, we do deal with those issues. Not all the time. I mean, some of our works are deal with politics. Most of them are more personal, I guess.
It definitely feels like this is something that's come in a lot stronger in the last couple of years. You know, this kind of like almost a lot more vocally talking about these, you know, whether it's talking about apartheid in your mural in South Africa, whether we're talking about homelessness. You know, I feel like there's been a more direct conversation opening up with these subjects. Is that something that you're consciously doing?
It's not a conscious decision of like a strategy, but it's we realize that we kind of feel more like a natural passion of like we need to say something, not because we need to change people's mind, but we kind of have something built inside of us that needs to be released. Comes and goes. Like we can do like suddenly something very political, but then we feel free enough to just then a year of just doing, you know, funny turtles or whatever, and then go back to it. It doesn't have to be like I'm a political artist and that's all I do.
As far as murals, I think it started as a thing that you come to a place and you like trying to react to what do you see on what is catching your eye there, what is important to pass to the wall.
It's kind of also almost like a challenge for us that we like to take an idea that if I just tell you, you'll say like there's no way that anyone will let you paint it on a huge building in the middle of town. But then our challenge is to do it so fun with the colors and so pop that people would just like pass by and say like, this is great, thank you. And then maybe with time they're like, what's going on? Why is this guy doing this? And they realize the kind of more the story, which is very, it's the opposite of what the mural we did here, which is just a bird, but a lot of people kind of seem to be already pissed about it, which is just a kind of cute little bird. So it just shows you how people, first of all, they see the colors, and then
they almost can't go beyond that. You could do a skeleton getting his dick sucked, but
if you do it fun enough, and it's a good challenge. But it is interesting because you feel like, okay, this is serious times, right? The world, Trump, Brexit, whatever, we need to react. But then you look at like Second World War, that she was a bit more serious, and what was the important art? And it wasn't necessarily the more direct propaganda. It could be like a still life by Matisse that changed art, or that still talks to children in 2022 because it just brought something new. So as an artist, it's not necessarily your role to just directly say something clever. It's not a tweet or a Facebook post.
Which is funny because your mural looks like it just killed Twitter.
Yeah. Sometimes I look at it as like, this is art, it shouldn't be like this. Some other times I'm saying, yeah, but this is also like a poster, and it's okay to just do like, this is propaganda, and I'm okay with this.
You're listening to Radio Juxtapoz live from the Crystal Ship Festival in Belgium, where we are in conversation with UNGA and TANT from the Israeli art collective Broken Fingaz crew. Right now you're listening to The Human Torch by Haifa duo 3421. Head over to the 3421 Bandcamp for a sneak peek at what to expect and get a first-hand look at the album art created by the Broken Fingaz' very own Deso. If you're enjoying this episode, please let us know on social media at Radio Juxtapoz, or why not slip us a couple of nice words in a review. But right now, we're going to get even more personal as we get back into it with UNGA and TANT. You talk about, this idea of it being colorful and quite graphic, but like a lot of your work for a long period of time was quite highly sexually driven, quite sexually charged. So what was the sort of the driving factor behind that? What was the role, in your sort of opinion, of using sex in your artwork, but also in the public?
Actually, I think it's never started as a like provocative act. We just love to paint skeletons and naked girls. It was like our practice for a long period of time, and then we just start doing it in the street, and we saw the reaction, and it was interesting to see. We did a series of work in Hackney Week back in like 14 maybe.
But it was a little bit a reaction, because I do remember that we were in London and we were just like amazed of how street art became such a thing and so mainstream, and like the street art tours, and now it's everywhere. But then it was like, wow, we're not used to it.
Hilarious. I'm just going to come clean on this one. I think I was a street art tour guide in London in 2014.
And you were
living in the Wick.
Yeah. So fair enough.
Yeah, and everything was so like kitsch in that period. Still, we feel like street art has gone, like, became to be like something very beautiful. Most of the murals or
it have to be Instagrammable. That's kind of,
So we kind of got sick of it. Okay, we can't. We walk in the street and we see all these like cute characters, and yeah, we felt like we want to do something
just to bring a bit of the rawness of, just the same way you like punk rock and you want this sound and you need, and you keep having to find the boundaries, not because I want to piss people off, because I want to,
Do something that no one else is doing.
yeah, and kind of challenge it, because this is how you start a conversation. And, at the time it was just, this is what was felt right for us and interesting, and we just did tons of them all over.
I remember them well.
And it was also fun because this is something you can only get away by doing it illegally. So we would go usually during the day and just stop and just do them around Hackney Week. And if someone like commission you to do a wall, there's no way that he will, allow it. So just take full advantage of it.
London has played a big part in Broken Fingaz. Do you remember how it felt at the start? What was that? What were your first impressions of that city when you arrived? All bright-eyed and fresh-faced.
Red-eyed. The smell of fried chicken everywhere, I remember, when we just arrived. Everyone are very clean. It's like, shit, I'm wearing my best clothes and I feel dirty. Step up my game. People look sharp. I really liked it since the beginning. There's always this Paris-London thing. I liked Paris, but when I came to London, I was like, okay, this is a place I would live. And it was an important place for us. We had the first show we did, our first solo show ever, before we even did one in Israel, was in London. And it was like, it was an important thing for us. We got invited to do a show by Noe and Rudy in the Truman Brewery. And we were just, I guess, so naive that we were just like, okay, let's just do the biggest show ever, and didn't think like in any way about logistics. So just like 2 weeks before the show, we called them, by the way, we need a full container to be shipped from Israel. And they're like, we don't have the budget. Okay, if someone have to ship it, and they did. And we took over a huge space, and we wouldn't probably, no one would allow it now. We also didn't sell even one painting, so it was a complete disaster, but it was great and it made an effect. After the show also, they didn't ship it back, so we just were stuck with a container full of artwork. And until today, I sometimes go to someone in London and they have a piece of work from this show.
Yeah, and how's that relationship changed? I mean, you saw kind of the sausage being made in London, I think. You saw that. I think there's just such for me, that period in London was just such a clear example of that. Just that tipping point of like what you were saying earlier, where street art just suddenly went from something that felt really raw and open into something that became just an extension of aesthetics.
And capitalism. It doesn't necessarily, it's not, there are cities that you come and you're like, oh, I feel inspired to go out, do something in the street. London is not necessarily this for me, but there are other stuff that inspires me there, like the tradition, and there's something very stable. We come from a country that like 70 years ago, it wasn't exist. And it also feel like no one knows that if in 10 or 15 years it will exist. That's the state of mind. Really, you feel this like, let's live now, no one knows what's going to be tomorrow. So being in a place with London of like, we've been on this island for years and we will be no matter what, there's some stability that I like, and I think maybe, I don't know, maybe this is why you have good music as well or something. There's something about it.
That's super interesting. I've never thought about London in that way, or Britain in that way, as a sort of, as an anchor of stability. And I think this is probably just the luxury you get when you live in a place that isn't threatened by enemies on all sides. Is that genuinely just what it feels like growing up in Israel? You feel like this is a 15-year time span?
And not in a dramatic way. It's just like, this is life and you accept it. But you don't even think about it when you're there. Only when I moved out, then this is when you start to realize, it's like, whoa, people like sign contracts for 20 years. 20 years, man, this is a lifetime. And like, even the way that you like, no one think in the long run in Israel. No one, not even the government. Everything is like 5 years is a lot. And this is why it looks like a mess as well, because there's no planning.
And there's no tradition. I mean, like when you go to Europe, so it's all built up on like layers of like traditions. When you come to Israel, it's built on a sand, basically.
Mm-hmm.
In a way, I think it's also a good thing. Like same as Haifa, when we grew up in a place there were nothing, so you have to create something, and it doesn't lay down on something that exists, because you create your scene, you create your style, you create your movement.
Without the responsibility that sometimes Europeans have, I feel, of like, it's a different responsibility. Yeah. Now with my son, I felt this responsibility with the Brit Milah, the circumcision. It was like the first time that, because people were like, man, are you crazy? It's like for 3,000 years, we've been chopping the foreskin and you're going to be the one that breaks it. And I'm like, I don't know. It sounds stupid to me. And it was a hard thing to decide. So it's kind of, but then I realized, okay, maybe this is a bit how Europeans feel about other stuff.
I'm not too sure what the comparison would be in the European sides. Like, you're like, oh, maybe this is how they feel about, and I'm like, I don't quite know what that would be, maybe, but I understand completely. Is this something that a lot of like younger Israeli men are kind of considering now?
You're asking what does the foreskin represent in this metaphor?
I'm trying to think. Well, in my head, my initial thought was like, I grew up in Scotland, so maybe it's like, maybe the foreskin in this analogy, in this metaphor, is a hatred of the English. In Scotland, you just grow up and you hate the English. Well, you gotta hate the English, son. We've hated the English for 3,000 years. You just do as we've done, and you'll hate the English as well. And maybe this is the same.
Yeah, I'm not even sure what I meant in the metaphor, but there's someone is the foreskin here, and someone is the rabbi, and there's a knife. And
do you think they've been having this same problem for 3,000 years, where they've gone, are we sure we want to do this, or is this just like a modern thing where they've gone, maybe this isn't the smartest, maybe we shouldn't do this?
I think even when we were kids, it wasn't a question in Israel.
You just do it. You go to the army, you chop your son's penis, and it just happened. Our generation started to ask, like, should we do all those things? Do
you think that's going to stay? Is that going to go? Is that going to be like Scottish independence? It's just going to happen at some point. We've just got to wait.
I feel like I said my cousin didn't do. They're pretty mainstream, and they didn't do a circumcision to their kids. So I feel
do you want to give them a shout out by name? Just
don't. I don't want. So they can be blacklisted in some shady lists.
No. I mean, the first time they'll be like, "Oh, I hear you were in a podcast." That's my son. Well, I'm glad we got to there.
Yeah.
I don't know how we got to there, but thank you for making sure that we did. No Hope never brought that up.
He's a bit Japanese. I don't know if we should check if he's circumcised. Maybe we could text him.
Hey, I've got an art question. Where did the fat man come from?
Ooh.
Speaking of circumcision.
Yeah. Let's move to naked fat man. I don't know. It's something I kind of just was always drawn to paint them. I think, it was just interesting. The shapes and the shaved bald man. I felt like it's like an international character. You see them in every country you go. You have the same kind of fat and bald guy with the ring here. So I just kind of, that's how it started. But I don't want, there wasn't like a fat man that raped me or something specific that started it.
I'm glad that trauma didn't get deep and dark. I'm glad that it wasn't that.
Yeah.
But because he has been a recurring image. I mean, you've had a lot of recurring, like the skeletons. There's been the lizards. There's been a lot of images that have kind of come through a lot. But for you, are they just graphic interpretations of something in your head, or just characters that you think are fun? They don't necessarily have to. That's on the other side, where it's like not everything has to be deep and political.
I think from the first place, you don't paint an image because you want to symbolize it to something. you just paint it because you feel like painting it. Then afterwards, it became like a story, or it finds the meaning in every piece. It can be different meanings maybe, but first of all, we just paint skeletons because we want to practice how to paint it. Or
there's a lot of instinct, and then sometimes you use your instinct, and if something works for you or interesting for you, then you just keep doing it, and sometimes at the end you understand retroactive, why did you do it, and sometimes you don't. And sometimes there is no much meaning, but it's just about repeating a motif so much until it kind of become like something like a piece of clay that you can play with. When you paint something so much and it kind of loses the meaning, and it's just a shape. So it's as a painter, it's kind of give you a certain freedom to. It's almost like abstract for you. You just use it as a tool.
Like an abstract language. Like we build a language, but the letters not necessarily mean something as outside of the context. We answered this in the same language to each other, so it creates a language that exists imagery. But
sometimes the topic of the painting wouldn't be like what we depict. It's just a tool to deal with something that for us is interesting at the time. And it could be about the colors or about the composition or about the expression. And we just use what in front of us or which image that we already drew so many times to do it. So people will see it and say, oh, that's an image of still life or of a dog. But actually the painting is not about this. It's about whatever we were dealing at the time.
Do you prefer to keep these meanings close to yourself, to keep the paintings kind of open for interpretation? Or do you think that they should have, like, this is what this is about?
Usually we do, I think. Sometimes it's very obvious, but other times when the meaning is just like, oh, this represents this, therefore that, I understood the painting, then it's a bit like, that's it. Then you understood it. You're moving on and it doesn't stick. So we always prefer to leave it a bit open-ended.
Also, that's the reason that we paint, that we do visual art. I mean, if we want to write an article or to write a book, so we will describe it in words. When you do a painting, it has to speak for itself as an art, as something that you look at. You're feeling something, there might be a story, but the most important thing is that it will be interesting as a painting, not as something that you can write about the painting.
For you guys then, how do these ideas and this sort of ethos, how does that change going from the street into the gallery and into the studio? What's the same and what's different?
It's very different. I think we're trying to adjust ourselves to every environment. I mean, not every wall will work in a different place, and most of the works that we do outside not necessarily work in a gallery, on a blank wall. When you do like an outdoor painting, so it has to work with the environment. When you do a painting for a gallery, it has to work by itself. It doesn't matter. You can move it from gallery to gallery to a museum, and it will still work the same.
Street art and graffiti is a lot about the context. It's where the location and the city and the architecture and most of the time the interest in street art is the people that understand their surrounding. And then moving into a gallery is just something completely new. You take some of the stuff that you learned in the street, but you have to learn from scratch again and understand and it's very exciting for us. I think that maybe 6-7 years ago we started to get a bit into more painting, because before everything was very flat. So even if we did an acrylic painting, we trying to imitate the seal screen effect, so it looks like a flat print. And then we felt like we did works for an exhibition, and the process was a bit like boring, because once you did the sketch, you already could know exactly how the painting gonna look. We traced it with a grid or whatever, and then you just kind of fill in. And it looks crisp and great, but it was a bit boring. So basically, once you traced it, it feels like a monkey can do it. And maybe it's okay, but we felt like we want the process also to be interesting and surprising. And we started to move a bit more into like painting with oil paint and from still life, and not even knowing what do we want to do, but just we want things to be more dynamic and to make. And first people were a bit like, what are you doing? Why? I mean, we want like skeleton fucking each other on the street, and suddenly you're painting bananas with oil paint. And I wasn't even sure why I'm doing it, but I felt a certain excitement that reminded me the excitement I felt when I started graffiti, of like, wow, that's all I want to do. So that's a good sign. So even if I don't know why I'm doing it, if I have this feeling, I'll keep doing it. And I'm still not sure where are we going, but I know that it gave us a lot of freedom, because once we did this and we started to do stuff that are a bit more weird for our audience, then you kind of get rid of the audience that is closed-minded enough and just want the same thing. And the people who stick with you are the people that are in it for the ride, and they're like, take us somewhere where we trust you. And then if you have this audience, it's a great freedom, because they understand that maybe not everything will be your best work, but it's going to be interesting.
How does it differ then when you're working on your own, when you're working together?
I think it's super important for us to be together. We're trying to meet like at least a few times a year, like for a residency or to work together on an exhibition or a project, and it always brings something new, I think, to the game. When we work alone, I think it's also important, and it's kind of like balance it, because each one developed his own skill or his own perspective, and then when we meet again, so we kind of reacted to those changes that each one of us has been through. So it's a very good system. I feel like it's a very good school for us. Like we always have each other for feedback, and
we kind of built a little system that gives us. I saw the Beastie Boys documentary not that long ago, and the thing that, first of all, it was just cool, but also the thing that inspired me the most, and I feel like we are kind of lucky to have it in a different way, is the fact that they really gave each other the ability to experiment. And if someone comes with a weird idea, and the others are not like looking at him, giving him like weird looks, they're just like, okay, we're not sure, but try it, sure. And they did it in such that really inspired me to push it even more after I saw it. And I think we also try to do it like, we will never say like just no. If someone brings something and you're not completely sure, you're like, let's try it, and then maybe we're not going to use it, but we're going to try it. So kind of allow it. And there's a lot of power to it, and whenever we get together, some new ideas come to life.
Have you guys started thinking about like where that goes? You know, where Broken Fingaz goes from beyond this cool entity that moves around and appears in places? Can it go back and recreate the kind of same energy or environment that you grew up in some capacity? You know, can it then plant roots somewhere more permanent, is really my question.
I don't know. I mean, we talk about it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was kind of our dream for a long time to have this community back. For a few years, I think I was really motivated to make it happen somehow. Still, I mean, it will be amazing if it will happen. But then, yeah, you grow up and each one have his family, and you get settled a little bit, and everyone get more lazy.
It's harder to move.
To move and to build to build something. Even our parents, that like it worked for 10 years, and then we got kicked out of this place, and they never managed to make it happen again. They tried, but it's hard.
But we do. I think if you ask us what are the dream scenario is to live near the beach or near nature, but not too far from a city.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, to be surrounded with friends, like to have a community, a sense of community, and to create art. To just have a big studio and create art. That's it. I think none of us want to be rich just for, buying fancy cars. It's just we want to have a nice studio and to be able to choose the project that we want and just, And I do believe it will happen. There was one moment that just each one was in a completely different part of the world. Recently, because of Des and Tant came back to Haifa recently, and we're going to hopefully open a new studio there soon. So maybe it still will happen, but
also, in this time, we always talk about the bad things about all this social media, but it also have a good thing. We have a community, even if it's doesn't have like a physical place. We do have a community, and we talked a lot. Three of us, if not every day, so we're a few times a week, and we do meetings, and we always in the subconscious of each other. Even if UNGA or Deso is not working with me in the same space, when I do a drawing, I already have their voice telling me, something.
What the fuck, man?
I don't know. I think there's something so beautiful about that idea. I just think in a world that just becomes so individual and so, our ancestors will have grown up in communities. They will have relied on each other. They will have relied on big families. This was how you survived. You survived because there was power in numbers, that you would have enough people to look after you and to do all these things. And a community was this really important thing. And I think growing up in Britain, that's been chipped away at. And forget about graffiti. I think the greatest act of rebellion is this idea of having these small collectives of people that are, fucking talking to each other and relying on each other. I think it's a really powerful thing that you guys have described here, and I hope that people listening can take something away from that. And I really enjoyed listening to you guys talk today.
You need to put your ego down if you want to live in that kind of community or a collective or a crew, whatever. You have to take your ego down. You're not and to be super open about everything.
There you go. That was it. UNGA and TANT from the Broken Fingaz crew. Hit up their social media pages. We will put the links in the show notes. I definitely recommend, if you haven't had a chance already, if they are still available, get your hands on one of their sexy new books. It's a full deep dive into their 20-year history, and it is just really, really, really well produced. If you're listening to this at the exact time of release, there might still be a couple of the Ukraine prints that we mentioned way back at the start of the episode. I don't know. They were going fast by the time I recorded this, so good luck on that one. But anyway, thanks to the guys for taking the time to sit with me. Thank you once again to the whole team at Crystal Ship for facilitating this. My name was Doug Gillen. I will be back with you with one final episode from Belgium. This one is an absolute hitter. We have got Bezd from the ETAM crew, one of my all-time absolute favourite muralists. Until that moment comes, take care of yourselves and each other. Is there anything else you guys want to add?
I didn't tell Dan if I did circumcise him or not, but
For the listeners that have made it to the end of this podcast,
next episode we will find out. Plus a photo in the description below. Like and subscribe.